Hi everybody, Morgan with the Video Answer here, and today I'm making this rustic wooden lantern. It comes together really quickly, and today I'm doing it without power tools, so you don't need a fancy workshop to make something beautiful like this for your next party or event. So follow along and I'll show you how we did it. The three most important supplies you'll need for this project include 1/2-inch dowel rods, and mine are basswood that come 24 inches long. The type of wood doesn't really matter. What's most important is that they aren't warped. I'm also going to be using some indoor rated wood glue as well as a miter saw, and if you're going to use a handsaw, I do suggest you use a miter box, and that will make getting nice square cuts really easy. For everything else I'm using today, I'll put those in the description box below so you know exactly what I'm using. The first thing I'm going to do is cut all of my dowel rods to length. So I need 4 pieces that are 12 inches long and 8 pieces that are 4 inches long. And that's it. That's all the cuts we need to make for this entire lantern. So I'm going to go ahead and measure everything out and grab my miter box to get everything cut. So I'm using a little clamp here to hold the wood in place, which made the sawing a lot easier to do. And I'm just going to end up cutting all of my pieces just like this. Now I did notice that once I got to the end, some of the pieces had this jaggedy little edge on it, but that comes off really easily. So I used a craft knife and just running it right along the edge, simply trimmed it away. You could also use a little bit of sandpaper if you weren't comfortable holding a knife like this. So once I had all of my pieces cleaned up, this is what they look like. The last thing we need to do before assembly is sand down all of the dowel rods. Now I've got a 220 grit sandpaper piece here, and I'm going to sand all 4 sides of my pieces. Now I'm not going to worry about sanding the ends unless there was little jaggedy bits on them, because I don't want to mess up my cut measurements. So I'm going to go through and sand all sides of all my pieces, and this will save me a lot of time later because this will be a lot harder to sand once everything's glued together. I laid down a little bit of wax paper on my tabletop just so I don't get any glue on my nice tabletop. I'll also be using my wood glue and some painter's tape for this next step, and the tape is going to take the place of a clamp. So you could totally bust out some clamps if you have them, but tape is a great alternative if you don't have something like that around. So I'm going to lay these out into a rectangle and put a little bit of glue on either end of the short pieces. Now you want to make sure there's enough glue to cover the entire surface, but not so much that you get tons of squeeze out, because we'll have to clean that off later. Now I'm going to secure all these joints in place with a long piece of masking tape, and you want to make sure you get a lot of tension on these corners because this is what's going to hold everything in place until that glue dries. So I'm going to apply tape to all of my edges and then press down on this to make sure it's nice and flat. And then I'm going to compare my rectangle to either a ruler or a speed square to make sure all of my angles are nice and square. And then I'm going to repeat this for my second rectangle and set that all aside to dry. Once those are dry, we can add the final 4 pieces to make this a 3-dimensional shape. So I'm going to repeat the exact same steps by adding glue onto the ends of my short pieces and taping them all in place to act as clamps. This is a really easy project to batch out if you needed centerpieces for a bridal shower or a baby shower. I would recommend though, if you're thinking about doing this for a wedding or a larger event and you need to make like 20 of these, you may want to consider using power tools because it'll go a lot faster and your cuts are going to be really nice and accurate. Once I had all the joints together, I stood it up on end to make sure that everything was nice and square and it was going to stand flat on the table, and then I just set it aside to dry. With the frame of the lantern done, I'm going to go back over a couple of my joints with a little bit more sandpaper because I did have a little bit of glue squeezed out on some of my joints. And I'm going to be using a stain on my wood, so I have to get all of that glue removed or my stain won't adhere to the wood. If you're planning to paint your wood frame, this step won't matter because the paint will adhere to the glue regardless. So if you're using some spray paint or acrylic paints over the top of this, you can skip ahead to the finishing process. To finish off my lantern, I'm going to be applying some gel stain in a walnut color. I absolutely love the look of walnut on wood, and I'll be applying that with a foam brush and then wiping it away with some paper towels. I'm applying a generous amount of stain in the same direction as the grain of my wood and making sure I get a nice thorough coverage, and then I'm going to go back with my paper towel once the correct amount of time has elapsed and wipe away all the excess. I would encourage you to work in small sections. I got a little hasty with mine and put it on a lot, and then it started to dry in a way that I didn't love. So work in small sections and watch where you're placing your fingers so you don't leave fingerprints in your stain, and follow the directions according to your product because there's lots of different stains and finishing products out there and they all have different requirements. The finish you decide to use can greatly change the look and feel of the lantern. You could leave it in the natural buff wood, you could stain it like I am, or you could even paint it a bright metallic gold or a deep black. These are all going to give you very different feels from the same base lantern. After everything dried, I added this gorgeous noosque to the center of my wood lantern. You could always decorate this with candles, fairy lights, or glass vases in the center. They'll all pair beautifully with this wood lantern for your next event. I hope you were inspired by today's video. You don't have to have a giant workshop and tons of tools to make beautiful things for your next party or event. If you enjoyed today's video, hit that subscribe button below and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any of the future projects I've got coming up. You can check out some of my other videos over here, and until the next time, remember to stay creative.